Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings to our esteemed guests and welcome to the next Digital Frontier Virtual Conference hosted by RAC Center in collaboration with PwC. My name is Adai Rikefe and I'm an Associate Director at PwC and I'll be your host for today. Our session today will focus on some of the key economic imperatives for transformation. We hope that this event will inform, encourage, and challenge you in your various areas of business. The opening remark for this session was meant to be delivered by His Excellency, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, SAN and Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Unfortunately, he is unable to attend, but he sends his sincere apologies. We have a good lineup of panelists, including Mr. Kabir Cha, Director of Real Estate at Actis, Dr. Mariam Lawal, Technical Specialist at the World Bank Group. We'll also be hearing from Dr. Andrew Nevin, PwC Partner, West African Financial Services Leader and Chief Economist, Dr. Ayotunde Koka, CEO of RAC Center, and our moderator for the panel discussion is Mr. Femi Oshinibi, PwC Partner and Technology Leader across PwC West Africa. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A session. Please feel free to post your questions at any time during the event using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. So permit me to introduce my first speaker for today, Chief Economist and Partner, Dr. Andrew Nevin, to the virtual stage. He will be speaking on the macroeconomic trends and the investment landscape for Africa. Dr. Andrew Nevin is one of PwC's leading global thinkers, working at the complex intersection of economic strategy, capital markets, and investment. He has almost 34 years of professional experience as an entrepreneur, private equity investor, line manager, economist, and strategy consultant. His professional career spans across Asia, North America, Europe, and Africa. He's been based in Lagos since early 2012. In Nigeria, Andrew is a nation builder and public intellectual, playing a number of key roles to advance Nigeria and West Africa's economy and society, including founding Governor Financial Center for Sustainability Lagos, founding Director of the African Institute for Leadership and Public Administration, member of the advisory board at the Lagos Business School, amongst others. I would now invite Dr. Andrew to the stage. Thank you, Andrew. Over to
Thank you. Thank you, Ada, so much. That's just a kind introduction on that. I'm really delighted. My role in this is to relate the IT potential and the role that IT will play in Africa's development to the economy. And I come by this a little bit honestly. What Ada didn't mention was my first degree was in computer science. Sorry, I don't know why the slides are moving, but my first degree was in computer science, but back when I did computer science, we used punch cards. So for those of you who are a little younger than me, which is everyone on this webinar, please look that up and see what a punch card is. So, okay, so let me just start out by saying, so I'm going to make a few economic remarks the next few minutes related to the IT imperative for the continent. But I wanted to start by kind of reminding everyone here today, just the scale of Africa. And we've all grown up in a world, at least I grew up in a world where we didn't necessarily pay as much attention to Africa as we need to, or we will in the future or today. This just reminds us from a physical viewpoint, just the immense size of Africa. And of course, you know, many people are aware I'm Canadian. We benefit from the Mercator projection, which shows Canada much larger than it actually is. Of course, the equator runs right through Africa, and at the end of the day, basically all the rest of the major countries fit into Africa. So let's not forget that as we kind of think about the impact of IT in Africa, because one implication of this is just to deliver things in Africa, to deliver health and education. It is not going to be possible to do it with traditional models in such a large landmass. And also let's, excuse me, just kind of remember the demographic reality. I mean, there is a very rapid shift around the world to Africa. This chart just shows over some different 5-year periods the number of births. The gray bar is everywhere in the world outside of Africa, and the red bar is Africa. So effectively, the middle one, in the period from 2035 to 2030 to 2035, over a third of the births are going to be in Africa. So just the weight. I mean, one thing people may not realize is the number of adults, working age adults outside of Africa is actually on the decline. The number of children outside of Africa is on the decline. The only place where there's any demographic growth is Africa. You know, why is this happening? So this just looks at the number of births across different countries on there, and you can see the number of births in Nigeria over a 5-year period, again, the same 5-year period, 3 5-year periods, is increasing. Of course, every country in Africa is in a similar situation, but the number of births in India and China is already rapidly decreasing. The number of births in Brazil is decreasing. The number of births in Indonesia is decreasing. And all of this just shows you from a physical and a demographic perspective, everything is rotating to Africa. And of course, the reason for it is the replacement rate. I mean, you can look at so many countries you would think would have a rapidly growing population actually are not able to replace it. So even India is falling below the fertility rate, replacement total fertility rate of 2.1. You know, and the net result again is just no matter how we look at it, we're moving to a world where there's really only 2 demographic poles, where they're Africa and Asia. And if you look carefully at this chart, you'll see that back in 1990, the population of Europe was larger than Africa. Now, today, the population of Africa is about double Europe, and soon it'll be triple Europe. And as I said, I think 10 years ago, I said, actually, Europe needs Africa a lot more than Africa needs Europe. So let me also just touch very briefly, because others are going to talk about it more from a technology perspective. Here's 8 technologies that PwC, but of course many others are highlighting that are critical for that. And you know, all of these are critical. Many of us today will talk a bit more depth of them. I just wanted to highlight 2 quickly. One that I've talked a long time about in the Nigerian context, African concept, is blockchain, which is let's call it a distributed ledger technology, which really creates a golden source of the truth. And there's so many use cases that are going to be really critical in Africa over the next decades with blockchain. But another one I wanted to highlight was just the drones, just because I want us to remember that not all technology is digital technology. And I think it's very critical as we go forward to link the physical world and the virtual world, the digital world together. And I think that, you know, some of the most exciting companies I've seen link these things. They use drones with AI, for example, and that's, you know, something in the agricultural thing. So, you know, to solve Africa's problems, we're going to need not just digital, but we're going to need technologies that touch the physical world. Okay, so now we were promised a little economic linkage to all of this. So these are a number of themes that we've been talking about that relate to the Nigerian economy, but they relate broadly to the African economy. And many of them I'm going to link to IT in the next 5 minutes on that to set us up for the rest of our discussion today. So to begin with, I mean, we've been talking a lot about the economic power of the diaspora. The diaspora remittances are the only thing holding up the Nigerian economy. At the end of the day, it's not an oil economy, it's a brain economy, brain exporting economy. About $25 billion officially in diaspora remittances in the last few years per year. On that. Now, you know, how does that relate to technology? Well, at the end of the day, there's so much innovation going on right now with this remittance flows, reduction in costs, more transparency in all of that. And it's really being driven by so many fintechs around Nigeria and around the continent. And I apologize for the picture of the US dollars. I'm trying to write another paper on trying to get the US dollar out of the African economy, but we'll get there. But I wanted to relate that more importantly, because of course the diaspora is an export of brains. We've coined the term at PwC Nigeria that Nigeria's largest export is not oil, it's brains. But the thing about exporting brains is we're now learning you can export brains without necessarily leaving Nigeria on that. And that's something that we try to put on the agenda. I'm going to cite my wonderful friend Amal Hassan, who's a national hero in Nigeria. She has a company in northern Nigeria, which has 1,000 employees, outsourced global, which is perhaps the leading domestic ICT business process outsourcing firm. And she is exporting Nigerian brains without people leaving Nigeria. And if you think about it a minute, 70% of the world economy is services. We need to export more than oil in Nigeria. Are we going to be exporting small scale manufacturing, or are we going to be exporting services? And we're already exporting. Amal Hassan's doing it, financial services are doing it, Nollywood is doing it. So we're already emerging as a powerhouse, certainly in Nigeria, to export services. But the implication for that, of course, is you cannot export services without a very robust ICT infrastructure on there. So we need a new type of infrastructure to support this. And of course, this export of brains is not unique to Nigeria. It's going to be something that all of Africa does this way. So it just means that we need this underlying ICT infrastructure. Similarly, one of the things that we've argued about Nigeria, and I think is true across Africa, it's not enough to just have growth in Lagos, in Mombasa, in Kigali. It needs to be all over the continent in many, many smaller centers. So Sokoto, Plateau, Cross River, Abia, every state there, which means that we need things that are going to drive this sort of innovation, this catalyst for growth, things like innovation hubs, clusters, education. But all of these things, again, cannot be delivered in these places without a very robust ICT infrastructure, both on the skill side and on the physical side, of course, solving the power problem as well. Similarly, when we think about infrastructure in general, again, I think we chose the wrong photo here. One of the things that we're really learning, of course, is that infrastructure is not what we traditionally think of it. It's just as important to have 5G, ICT, power that's powering the innovation centers as much as it is to have the trains and the road network or the inland ports. And of course, one of the other things that we talk that's critical for Africa and Nigeria is bringing the informal sector to the formal sector. But this is, again, not going to happen without a robust IT architecture that allows people in the informal sector to join the formal sector in a very simple way, using a very simple device and hooked into an electronic way. It's not going to be a traditional brick and mortar joining of the formal economy. One of the things we've also been talking a lot about is shifting from a GDP lens to an SDG, Sustainable Development Goal lens. It's just really gained traction. I think in Africa, I was at an amazing event on the weekend with the President of Ghana and His Royal Highness, His Excellency, His Royal Highness, Muhammadu Sanusi II, who are two of the 17 SDG advocates in the world. There's only 17, and the President of Ghana, His Excellency, is actually the co-chairman of that. And I think Africa is really ahead of the rest of the world in embracing this SDG lens. But one of the implications of the SDG lens, and every time we talk about this, the political people come back and say, well, we need data, we need data, we need data. So what's the underlying ICT infrastructure that can support actually being able to measure, are we making progress on the SDGs? And then finally, I'm not sure, I hope in the course of our session, we can relate this to technology more, but at the end of the day, the PwC's perspective, and I think we've been very clear, and I've been very clear in many settings, is, of all the challenges we have in the world, we do have one that is a existential crisis. So, we're obviously extremely concerned about COVID-19, and it continues to be a crisis around the world. We have an economic fallout of COVID-19, but behind that we have climate change. And I'd really like to hear kind of the thoughts of our panelists today and of the whole audience on this, and the relationship between, how does technology help us address the climate challenge? And of course, the climate challenge is real. Any number, I mentioned this amazing event that I was at on the weekend. We had a representative who is from an indigenous community in Lake Chad. She is an amazing woman. She's also one of the SDG advocates, the 17 in the world. And of course, we've seen Lake Chad disappear by 90% in the last 30 years on that. So this particular chart always worries me because it shows the percentage of population that it would potentially be underwater if we had a 2-degree increase in temperature. You can see that Nigeria and Ghana and Ivory Coast are all colored light blue, which would mean 10 to 25% of their population would be underwater. And it's all connected. I mean, if you look a little carefully at this chart, you know, if we have failure in climate action, involuntary migration, we're seeing that in the Sahel region, food crises, water crisis, social instability, biodiversity loss, human and man-made disaster. So this is not something for the future, this is something for now. So let me just pause here. This is my role in all of this is just to get set up for a robust conversation about the role of technology in Africa's development with our tremendous panel and other speakers today. But I just want to end with one concept I'd like to leave you with. So the OECD is starting to investigate what they call brain capital as a core strategy for a nation. And brain capital includes obviously your skills, but also includes things like emotional intelligence, knowing how to learn, mindfulness, creativity, obviously the lack of mental illness. I mean, COVID's really highlighted the role of mental illness in society. So I'd like to put forward that the future for Africa is where we optimize brain capital, but we're only going to be optimized brain capital if we also optimize the way we use technology to solve Africa's challenges. So let me pause there and turn it back to Ada. We're going to have a very robust, I think, conversation and interaction with the audience today, and I hope that this has teed up our conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for this insight. I think the one thing I pulled out of it was our economy is no longer dependent on oil-borne brains, so we can export brains remotely. Let's think brains as a service. We always have as a service for most things. So in this case, this will be brains as a service. So before we move on to our next speaker, we would love to hear from our audience. We're going to conduct a quick poll to get your feedback. So if I can have the poll up, and we have less than 2 minutes to please answer the poll. Thank you. Great. So the first one is, in your view, which of these things will have the most impact on the African economy within the next 5 years? So Andrew touched on climate change, shift from GDP lens to SDG, power of the diaspora, export growth through services. And the second question is, in your opinion, what will be the leading enabler for the 5th industrial revolution, which is yet to happen, but it's happening soon? So it's either 5G, AI, blockchain, big data. Great, thank you. So we can end the poll now, thank you. So the responses are in. We'll share the results after the Q&A session. Thank you everyone for participating. So following Andrew's wonderful economic overview, let's drill down into the experience of driving Africa's digital transformation beyond stats and figures. What are the daily realities? So to provide his interpretation to the macroeconomic trends in relation to infrastructure in Nigeria and Africa, I would like to welcome Dr. Ayotunde Koka, Managing Director and CEO of RAC Center. So I'll quickly read out some excerpts from his bio. Dr. Ayotunde Koka has over 30 years international experience across Europe, US, Asia, and Africa. His distinguished career included roles at Ford of Europe, Egg Bank UK, which was the first European internet bank, BP, UK Criminal Justice, and he was once the Group IT Director at the UK Ministry of Justice. He was also the Group CIO of Access Bank at one point, and then the MD CEO of Emerging Market Payments, West Africa. As the MD CEO, he has built RAC Center to be a household name and a leading data center brand in Africa with global recognition and numerous international awards. He is currently the Secretary General of the African Data Center Association. He recently received the Distinguished Manufacturing Alumnus Award for 2020 from Cranfield University, UK. He has an MSc in Mechanical Engineering from the University of South Wales. Is an award-winning postgraduate alumnus of Cranfield University, UK, a fellow Institute of Director, UK, fellow British Computer Society, honorary senior member, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. He holds a PhD by ESCA, University Republic of Benin. Dr. Tunde, you're very welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ada, and a good day, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you everyone for coming on board this event. Andrew's painted an economic context for Africa that shows the compelling fundamentals we have for Africa, the next digital frontier. You know, we've gone through to the fourth industrial revolution now, and I noticed Andrew's also mentioned about the fifth industrial revolution, and there's certain fundamentals that are driving that growth of Africa being the next digital frontier. And I really liked the aspect of the brains idea. You know, how do we underpin the brains with technology? How do we really unleash the power of African brain capacity to drive the next digital frontier? Now, there's some compelling growth drivers that we do have in Africa, and bringing that also into the Nigeria context. You know, we've got the demographics. The median age in Africa, in Nigeria, is about 18 years, and that's actually even one of the higher ones in Africa. You know, we have a huge number of micro, small, medium enterprises, 40 to 45 million, depending on some of the statistics we look at. And even just the SMEs, about 5 million. And these are economically active entities that are even more than the population of some countries, some very successful countries in the world. Broadband penetration is key. We're continuing to see increasing broadband penetration through fiber, through mobile 4G, LTE, you know, and so on, from what was 15% quite a few years ago to a target of 30% broadband penetration about 3 years ago. And now we're around about that 40% mark, hovering between 40 and 45%. You know, research shows that, you know, for every 10% penetration in broadband growth in broadband penetration, it has an average impact on GDP of 1.5 to 2.5% growth. So some fantastic growth fundamentals there. And the number of internet users, there are around about 150 million internet users in Nigeria. That is behind Brazil and of course China, India. That's higher than Russia, which is the highest number of internet users in Europe. And the trajectory really is to beat Brazil. And after that, we have a fantastic geophysical location. We are in a right time zone, north to south and east to west. So there are a variety of fundamentals there. And the panel here will look at what it means, shine a light on Africa for the international investors, the international technology framework community, content providers, the big cloud providers. You know, cloud is the way that we're going to reach the consumption of technology, of course, with mobile telephony in the primary channel to market. Research has shown by Cisco and some companies like that, that this is going to be the primary channel to market. And the success of the mobile network operators in Africa has shown that if you get the business model right, then the scale of Africa can be tapped into. And the example I use is this: Africa is a sachet economy. We don't buy big bulk of goods. We buy little sachets on a need basis. You know, where daily earners will earn today and spend today for what they need tomorrow. From a digital point of view, the way to therefore deliver that sachet economy example here is through cloud. It's through having digital infrastructure on the continent. And we're now seeing the growth of digital infrastructure in data centers across key locations, Nigeria being one anchor point, South Africa, which there's been tremendous growth, East Africa and parts of North Africa. Layer that with the facts that we also have broadband penetration and content consumption. So the way we've structured this here is this context setting a seminar that we have, looking at the economic imperative. We will now, because of the sheer depth and scope of the digital opportunity, we will follow this with another a seminar that will look at infrastructure in Africa, taking on from this, and following that another one that looks at content distribution, content consumption in Africa. Shine the light on Africa, where you have the content distribution networks in the world. Know that we have to put the infrastructure in place, leverage growing digital infrastructure in Africa. So I enjoin you to listen to what the panelists will be saying, looking at this context of Africa, the next digital frontier. And I thank you very much for joining this event today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Coker. Thank you for bringing your perspectives to bear and highlighting Africa as that digital infrastructure. You mentioned the right geophysical location, right time zone. I think that's so critical. And I like what you said about Africa being a sachet economy. So we always have to look for how best to digitize that. That's great. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next segment. And to kick off the next segment, Andrew, Dr. Nevin and Dr. Coker have mentioned that opportunities for investments are vast, but require coordinated large-scale investment and an appetite for problem solving. So to add their expert insight to this discussion, I would like to introduce and welcome our panelists, Dr. Miriam Lawal and Mr. Kabir Chow. I would read out experts from Dr. Miriam's bio. So if we can please go to Dr. Miriam's bio, thank you. So Dr. Miriam Lawal is an analytical-minded young professional with experience and interest in the link between information communication technologies, ICT, and socio-economic development with a particular focus on digital economic transformation. Her professional experiences are broadly situated within global development practice. Miriam's academic achievements include a PhD in development planning from University College London, UCL, MSc in Management Information Systems and Digital Innovation from the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE, and she has a BSc in Information Systems from the University of Hertfordshire. You're very welcome, Miriam. Our next panelist, Mr. Kabir Chow, is a director at Actors, a leading investor in growth markets across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Kabir joined Actors Africa's real estate team in 2014 and is based in the Nairobi office. He has been involved in several deals across 2 fund vintages, most recently leading a US $100 million investment in a Pan-Africa data center platform. Kabir successfully led the fund exit from Mentor Management and is the investment manager for the Garden City Business Park. He previously spent 5 years at CDC, making and managing direct private equity investments across Africa and South Asia. Kabir holds a BSc in Investment and Financial Risk Management and an MSc Investment Management from Carr's Business School. That's my alma mater. Welcome, Kabir. Thank you for joining us. And also joining them will be Dr. Andrew Nevin and Dr. Ayotunde Coker, previously introduced. Finally, our able moderator for this second half is Mr. Femi Oshinibi. Mr. Femi Oshinibi is a partner at PwC Nigeria and currently leads our risk assurance, technology, and digital businesses across PwC Africa. He has spent over 20 years of his career delivering consulting services and industry experience across various sectors like telecoms, financial services, and oil and gas in Europe, Middle East, the Caribbean, and Africa. Femi is at the forefront for the adoption of emerging technologies and innovation across several sectors in Nigeria. Femi is a computer science graduate, a fellow chartered accountant, and holds an MBA from Warwick Business School, United Kingdom. Thank you, Femi.
Good afternoon, and thanks for the generous introduction. Can everyone hear me? Ada, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Am I in control of the slide? Okay.
Great.
Let me hold on. Okay, I think I have control. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Ada, for that generous introduction. And Ada, I noticed that when you were doing the introduction, for some of us that don't really have a doctor in front of our names, so Kabir and I would actually go and look for a PhD. I
think so. Well, we'll hand over. We'll give you honorary doctorates now.
Yeah, I think I need the honorary one quickly. Afternoon, everyone, and thanks for that generous introduction. Before I go into the panel discussion, I probably just want to do a quick 10 minutes discussion on digital. I'd say just prepare us into some of the, before we go in depth into the discussion this afternoon. So the journey from Industry 1.0 to 4.0, first revolution, 18th century. All of us here didn't really, were not there at that time. Use of steam power, mechanization of production, and that was industrial revolution at that time. Then going to the second revolution, which began in the 19th century, discovery of electricity and assembly line production. And, all these things were really exciting things at that time, just like we see new things, AI, chatbots, and we get excited. At that time, there were a lot of excitement around electricity and then assembly line production. Then up to the third industrial revolution in the 70s, and still very recently, I think most of the people on this panel would probably experience some, well, not people, maybe not most, but at least a couple of people on this panel would have experienced that in the 70s through, partial automation using memory, programmable controls and computers. I think Andrew mentioned the days of Fortran and Pascal using punch cards, and that was what industrial revolution was in the 70s. And now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and we're really thinking of the fifth one, application of information and communication technologies to industry. So that's been the journey from fourth to from the first to fourth. Then the first industrial revolution is in full swing, ready, and is majorly driven by emerging technologies. Andrew mentioned a couple of that during this presentation. We are in the days of virtual reality, augmented reality, cloud computing, and Tunde mentioned that mobile devices, IoT, location. I'm struggling to see the one that is not applicable in Africa, even in Nigeria. I struggle. People think, is Nigeria ready for AI? We're ready for everything. We've been launching AI, still launched an AI solution at my PwC yesterday for West Africa. We have a lot of AI stuff happening across most clients. So we're really consuming when it comes to digital. So, everything you see here, it's actually, these are not things that you're waiting for, is this happening in the US or Europe? All these technologies are actually on ground in Africa. And that's what Industry 4.0 is all about. It's about digitization. And digitalization is about integration of vertical and horizontal value chains. It's about digitization of products and service offerings. If you look at the banking sector, the financial sector in Africa, a lot of that is happening. Everything is being digitalized at the moment. Business models, everything is, how you serve your consumers, everything is actually done digital. Next slide, please. So we've got some interesting global statistics. In 2018, enterprise SaaS platforms only accounted for 15% of total software expedition, but growth continued at 32% per year. A lot is happening around technology, around software as a service. And if you look at the business models, which I will share, in a couple of slides, several business models, you don't need to spend much to actually acquire anything digital these days. You don't need to even acquire them. You just, pay for what you want to use at any point in time. All those models are actually applicable. Then you see McKinsey's research around, by 2018, 47% of businesses have embedded at least one AI capability in their businesses, compared to 20% in 2017. And 2021, I can tell you that that number has grown. And if it's growing in this part of the world, it's definitely growing, and that percentage has really gone up. That same survey found that robotic process automation, computer vision, and ML, machine learning, were the most commonly deployed AI functions. And as of 2020, 85% of businesses said they were evaluating AI or using it in production. And that was as of March last year. I know a few companies that were evaluating at that time, and I can tell you that most of them have they're already deploying at the moment. The ones that couldn't do it last year, they're actually going through a lot of RFPs. So our friends here globally, it's really happening in the continent, and that it's just more compelling that we've got to really provide the right investment. Just under 40% of companies are deploying IoT today. But again, 50% of financial executives report having well-developed IoT initiatives. So yeah, and that will keep going. If you look at most of the equipment that we buy today, whether it's especially electronics, TV, fridges that we buy in our homes in Africa, almost every single TV that have been made in the last 2 years are IoT driven. So it's just to provide the right infrastructure, and everything will start working normally. Then again, when you look at virtual reality learning, V-learners were 4 times more focused during training than their learning peers, than their e-learning peers. So when you compare people that actually learn through virtual reality, and I'm doing some of that in some of the programs, and it's been, really the focus you get when you use virtual reality as a learning platform, the focus is probably, survey is saying that it's 4 times more focused than the e-learning peers, and 1.5 times more focused than their classroom colleagues. So it's even better than someone actually standing in front of you in the class. Again, 40% of the V-learners saw an improvement in confidence compared to classroom learners. And one of the surveys that we did at PwC shows 35% improvement over e-learners to act on what they learned after training in VR. So after going through e-learning, and if you go to VR learning, what happens after? We find out that there's a lot of improvement that people going through virtual reality. So we can see a lot of consumption going when it comes to digital, especially we need the right infrastructure to be in place to make sure that this thing can actually go around. Next slide, please. Africa can foster economic growth by leveraging digital infrastructure. A couple of things: lower barriers of entry. Digital reduces the barrier to entry for new business. A lot of new businesses have actually, been, sprung up in the last 1 year, especially during the pandemic, because we've got people are leveraging on internet, starting new businesses. There are lots of innovations happening to drive value creation, and services can be delivered from anywhere you are in Africa to anywhere in the world. So we don't have to create those buildings. You can work from anywhere, and that's what digital is actually doing to actually foster economic growth. Again, improve collaboration. We're working together very well much more, better than ever before through digital technologies and digital tools, and that will improve, and is definitely improving service delivery. Again, increased FDIs and investment, with increase in foreign and local investment as a result of more connected economy. Then there is more comfort going forward, more confidence going forward when you probably start from a country in Africa, Kenya. You can be an African company, in less than a year, spread across Africa, because of digital. Unlike before, where everything has to be bricks and mortar, you have to travel almost 10 times to actually have an office anywhere in the world. So it's getting easier, and then access to new markets, which is probably what I've just mentioned around improved business reach and visibility, enabling access to new markets and underserved customers. Next slide, please. The next slide is actually talking about 3 areas which we believe there are a lot of businesses now for them to thrive. You've got to look at how to drive businesses from the lens of using the mega trends. A lot of move around the urbanization, democratic changes, shifting economic power. But again, those technologies, the emerging technologies, are in which Andrew mentioned, are some of the ones that we believe that actually will improve businesses. And we'll keep mentioning that as we go along. But if you look at the models, and the reason why I said earlier that digital would actually enable a lot of things, would make things actually be easier for investors and consumption, and the consumers as well, is actually there are several models now. So you don't have to be everywhere. You don't have to invest so much. You don't have to buy all the assets. You can use the subscription model, which Apple is a good ecosystem model, rely on a lot of stakeholders. You don't have to be everything to everyone. Netflix, the experience model, the on-demand model, and those are just good examples. And if you look at businesses, especially digital businesses going forward, you can almost digitalize your business, whether it's a digital business or not, through any of these models without spending so much. Next slide, please. I'm going to rush through. I think I'm probably a couple of minutes behind. Digital development can change lifestyles and drives social inclusion. We've seen a lot of things around telemedicine, even in Nigeria, in Ghana, and in Kenya, improve healthcare. And I think we need that in Africa. We need digital to actually drive the health sector. Better education, that is most needed in Africa. And I will be challenging some of our panelists as we engage in the panel sessions. Employment opportunities. Andrew mentioned where someone in the northern part of Nigeria has got over 1,000 employees and actually providing services throughout the world without necessarily living in Nigeria. Access to government services, again, we can see a lot of government efforts around that, and we just have, we need the e-government services to really be improved, and we need a lot of investment in that. Again, improved interactions. All of us can now have a webinar like this. 2 years ago, a year ago, to have this, it's like everybody flying in the world from one part of the continent to the other, just to have 100 people attending a seminar. But now we have a webinar, and it's actually much even better than what we used to have. Next slide, please. What's needed to increase the momentum of Africa's Industry 4.0 journey? We've got the enabling environment, and we'll keep working with the government. All the stakeholders have got to participate to build a favorable digital ecosystem. The enabling environment, we need the regulatory authorities to really bring out the right policies to make sure that all of us can work and build this ecosystem, digital ecosystem, and make it work. Investments in infrastructure, we can't. I think we're going to be discussing that. Kabe is here, Mariam is here, and World Bank investors are here. We've got to talk about that. We've got, that is the next thing. We believe Africa is the next digital frontier, and investment is really required to make sure that we can really be there ahead of the game. Education, a lot of Africans are not really, tapping into proper education. But with digital, I think that gap can be really closed, really, really close through digital. When we have internet available across the continent, then I think it will really help in that. And the culture of innovation, how do we incentivize people that innovate? We have a lot of innovators across Africa. You will see amazing talents, but no incentivization, no commercialization of what they're doing. So those are the things that we believe are needed to really increase the momentum of the industry journey. Next slide, please, which is this is probably my last slide, and it's just actually even talking about how do we improve the infrastructure to deliver significant gains for the continent. Fiber to the home, we can't but keep talking about this. We need fiber across Africa. Undersea cable, and I know a lot of investments are going on. The likes of Facebook, Google, a lot of main one investing in undersea cables, and that needs to continue to drive, especially when it comes to Industry 5.0 and enabling a lot of things in Africa when it comes to digital. And the final one on this is the data centers. We have data centers like the rack center. Liquid is on, but we need more. We need more. Africa is huge. We need more data centers, and we need to invest in data centers to enable digitization. So next slide. Next slide is, I'm not going to talk through that because of time. It's just to depict most of the cables across Africa. Almost everywhere has been cables. Some of them are work in progress, Google, Facebook, main one, Glow. We have a lot of cables, ACE, WAX. So lots of cables across the whole of Africa. Africa is getting ready, Africa, but we need to keep pumping more money into to have everywhere wired, and I think Africa can be the next digital frontier, as we hope it will be. Next slide, please. Now the panel. I think I've tried to catch up. Now we go into our panel discussion. Got this distinguished panel who have been introduced earlier. Dr. Mariam Lawal, technical specialist from the World Bank Group. Dr. Ayotunde Koka, the CEO of Rack Center. Kabil Chow, Director of Access, and Dr. Andrew Nevin, Partner and Chief Economist, Pricewaterhouse, West African, the Financial Services Leader. I'm going to be moderating. Mariam, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know a lot of the participants when they see people from World Bank and IFC, oh, they are here today. So let's probably take that opportunity. It's not a question. I just want you to just open the floor for us from the perspective of digital, especially in Africa. I just want to tell you, just summarize, from the World Bank perspective, what are you looking at from the World Bank Group perspective when it comes to digital infrastructure? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Femi. Good to be on this panel with my fellow panelists. I'm excited and very, very pleased with the initial presentations that have covered key aspects of, what digital transformation means for Africa, with a particular emphasis on Nigeria. It's good to see the numbers that you've all referenced and cited, and there's opportunities for growth within Africa and for Nigeria. So, from my perspective and from what the World Bank does in terms of digital transformation, I think the understanding is that digital transformation is reshaping our global and regional economies, permeating virtually every sector and every aspect of our daily life. And so as a result of this, digital technologies are changing the way that we learn, the way that we work, the way that we trade, socialize, as well as access a range of public and private services and information. And so, the digital economy, I think the most recent data shows that it accounts for about 15% of the world's overall GDP, which is, it stands at around $11 trillion. And this has been predicted to reach around 25% within less than a decade. So the opportunities are there, the potential is also there. And so this also underscores the fact that there's a huge potential for citizens, for businesses, for governments to leverage digital technologies for socioeconomic transformation. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic has only served to reemphasize the fact that digital technologies are actually very, very important in our everyday lives and in the work as well. And so nearly everything we've had to do has suddenly moved online as a result of the pandemic. So we are now using a range of digital tools and techniques every day online as a result of the pandemic. So for us at the World Bank, leveraging this kind of opportunity for digital transformation sparked a conversation which led to the design and development of an initiative called the Digital Economy for Africa's Transformation. The acronym, I know it's too long, the acronym is DE4A. And so the DE4A initiative is part of the World Bank support for African Union's digital transformation, which wants to see every African individual, every business, every government to be digitally enabled by 2030. So the DE4A initiative is centered around understanding the digital positioning of African countries around 5 core pillars. And these pillars are digital infrastructure, digital platforms, digital financial services, digital entrepreneurship, as well as digital skills. The idea is for some of our activities to conduct a rapid diagnostic assessment across Africa to benchmark and understand where countries are around some of these key pillars. So I'm not going to go into any detail because I believe the discussions will center around these 5 key pillars. So I'll pause for now and hand back over to you, Femi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much about World Bank's plans in the last 3 minutes. Thanks for that quick introduction. But before I leave and go to the other panelists, I think my next question is, still back to you. And it's around, there's a lot of, there's a divide, urban-rural divide. So beyond that, there is still digital divide of access to the internet, which is reflected by income and gender. And according to the World Bank's report, and that's why I'm actually staying with you, World Bank's Digital Economy Diagnostic Report, even with the significant drops in data prices, people are saying, if we look at Nigeria, we keep dropping data prices. If there's going to be a 1 kobo increase, it's almost like the citizens will go on strike. So NCC is protecting to say, telecoms, you cannot increase data prices. But most Nigerians can still afford the devices to get online or to access the internet in a meaningful way. You see people, once they access the internet and they finish engaging you, they turn it off on their mobile devices until they think, so you've got to be real time if you're really accessing the internet. So your report also reveals the gender gap in mobile device ownership and thus accessibility in favor of men now. So a lot of men, your report is saying, have access to the internet, they have access to all these devices rather than the women. So with the internet comes access to information and opportunities. So how can we ensure that internet expansion doesn't merely reflect or even exacerbate existing social inequalities? We already have inequalities. Now we bring in digital and internet, and it's even creating those inequalities. So how can we ensure that this digital investment in digital and expansion doesn't make it worse?
Yeah, thanks, Femi. That's also a question that we not only deal with within the Nigerian context, but within the wider digital economy. And I believe that the background to this is that the unequal access to information and technology itself is a multifaceted issue that hinders human productivity as well as stifling microeconomic growth at the regional and national level for the federal government, the state governments across Nigeria, hence the digital divide that you refer to. And the division ensues as a result of the inequality of access. So this requires unique policy making as well as strategic government intervention to breach the digital divide. But also, it also requires private sector involvement in this area to push for things like connecting the unconnected. So, access to the digital economy. We've talked about laying fiber optic cables, for example. We need to think about things to do with device affordability. We need to think about also ensuring that people have the right skills to be able to use the range of digital services and products available to them. And so for Nigeria in particular, I know that one of the key drivers of economic growth is the telecom sector. And so, if you look at the subscriptions, I think the recent data that I saw was showing that telecommunication subscriptions in Nigeria stood at almost 200 million. I think it was about 173 to be precise, but nearly 200 million in comparison to, things like broadband penetration, which is at 30% or thereabout. So these trends may not directly highlight that there's unequal access to broadband as well as infrastructure, but they're indicative of some of the challenges that makes broadband connectivity even harder or more difficult to achieve in Nigeria. So again, I will come back to government interventions are necessary for us to correct some of the market failures that result from the lack of competition within the telecom sector. So we need to open up the market for more players to come in and step in and, address different aspects of infrastructure provision across the value chain. And then for us, Nigeria is already a country that is suffering from grave socioeconomic inequalities. So harnessing the technology for its use as a social agent may not really translate positively for Nigeria's future if we do not take the active steps to address some of these divides. So for Nigeria to become a competitive player in an international digital market, we need to offer technologies that are more affordable, more accessible, and more relevant for use. The ecosystem of entrepreneurship and innovation also needs to make sure that it is leveraging the opportunity presented by, who are the markets in rural areas, for example, who are the potential users that we can capture with some of our innovations within a context that can address some of these rural-urban divides or male-female divides in access to devices, in accessing digital platforms, as well as within our education sector, which prepares our children to have the necessary skills and literacy that they need to thrive in the job market and also meet the growing demand for the digital economy. And then finally, on this, I would say that government intervention, I think, is very necessary to increase the infrastructural capacity, especially in improving the rollout of, things like the fiber optic cabling and access to the internet across the country, with particular preference for rural areas to gain access. But again, it requires a huge amount of investment. So this then brings in the private sector. If we have a competitive environment where the private sector can see the value in making such high cost investments in the long term would have good returns for them, then I think it makes a case for the private sector to have the public sector to have an enabling regulatory environment that pushes the private sector to say, okay, this is worth doing. Companies like Main One are really pushing on this agenda. And I know Funke Opeke is one of the people that is really driving this concept of connecting the unconnected. So I hope that answers your question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for that response. And that is more, from the World Bank Group, from government intervention, people trying to. Now I'm going to an investor because the investor think differently, and I will still focus on the social. And my question goes to Kabir. From your perspective as an investor, can incentives to discourage social inequality, such as gender bias, be integrated into infrastructure investment? And if it's possible, what kind of investments have you seen or do you see working in Africa? So over to you, Kabir, still around social inequality.
Look, thank you very much. And I'll give you the private equity house's perspective. I mean, the short answer is yes, in lots of ways, on lots of levels. And I think, in order for something like this to be addressed, it needs to be embraced at all levels, all the way through the value chain of investment right down. So, for example, our investors are putting pressure on us, asking us more questions about diversity and inclusion from an Actis perspective and our portfolio, and they're beginning to incentivize us as the GP to focus on bias and gender inequality issues at Actis, at our executive committee, at our investment committee, and importantly, how we assess companies and the degree to which diversity and inclusion is a part of the value creation plan, and it needs to be integral to that. As an investor committed to responsibility and sustainability, we've made diversity and inclusion a strategic priority for at least the last 2 years, and as a consequence, we've a number of initiatives underway. Within the firm itself, we have a diversity and inclusion committee set up. We have an active female network set up that talks about the stories and the journey of our female colleagues. We have an open door initiative as an example where junior females can access support of senior ones. We're making strides, but there is still a long way to go. But this is really a core part of the Actis value set. And we're looking as a firm more closely at how we can link this to reward and think about incentivizing staff, incentivizing performance as a consequence of embracing this area. In terms of our investment process, we have diversity and inclusion centrally part of our investment committee papers. It's part of our due diligence. We look at the diversity and inclusion performance of target companies and whether or not there are things we can do to improve on that. In terms of our portfolio, we run lots of sessions with C-suite, with management. We do unconscious bias training. All our energy investments, for example, in the infrastructure space, have had 90-minute sessions in inclusive leadership and all that sort of thing, because it has to be embraced, as I said earlier, at all levels. Within the firm itself, we also delivered last year a pretty iconic mentoring program to our portfolio in Africa, where we targeted specifically diverse mentees, of which 50% were female. So I think it's about embracing it, it's about owning it, it's about ensuring that the approach to improving it cascades all the way through down to the portfolio, to our management, and then into staff employees. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that brilliant response, Kabel. Yeah. Thanks for that. I think, yeah, with Mariam and Kabel on these social inequalities, I think I'll probably go and move into the economist, Dr. Andrew. And the next question goes to you. It's around, we've seen a shift of, in terms of policy directed at developing the bright broadband infrastructure, especially if you look at Nigeria. NCC plans to raise about 265 billion for broadband development through PPPs, public-private partnerships with infracos. That's the next thing they're planning to do now. Almost through PPP. We've also seen there's also been drastic reductions or total waiving of right-of-way charges for providers in several African states, and that was never the case before. Have you seen the impact of these or other policy changes on broadband investments in Africa or Nigeria as a whole?
Well, I think in the Nigerian context, I don't think we've sort of seen enough policy that's compelling it forward. I didn't go into kind of ease of doing business, but there, still it's too difficult in that. And of course, we need to balance in this context. There needs to be a few things that are kind of centrally driven, like, so for example, the reduction of right-of-way charges. But a lot has to happen simply at the local or state level, or in a smaller country can happen at a national level. But part of the thing that's Nigeria is really struggling with is we have so many kind of national programs. People are not unaware. The Office of the Vice President is very involved in it. For example, the Nigerian Innovation Program, AFTB is involved in that. Everyone is trying to push in the same direction. But our way we've expressed at PwC is just there's still an over-centralization of some of these things. So I think what we would like to see is a few core things that need to be decided in a centralized way, perhaps like the right-of-way charges, but to minimize what the NCC has to do. And really, if you think about all of these technologies, it had to be, I mentioned it earlier, things had to happen at the local level, right? So that needs to be something that certainly kind of changes in the Nigerian context, where it's been this far too centralized. We have a little bit of a kind of thousand flowers blooming. We have a competition for ideas of different models, different business models, different technology approaches to solve problems, and the ones that are successful will kind of expand. But the center should focus on just making sure we get access. You were making the point, Femi, before that there are a lot of we talk a good game about getting access, but we still have too many people who don't have access. So what can they do to get that access? And then at the local level, they'll be able to kind of drive forward with the innovation, how to use it to deliver education, deliver healthcare, deliver governance, et cetera.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. Thanks for that response. Over to you, Dr. Porker. I think I haven't forgotten about you yet. I've got an interesting question for you. Nigeria is one of 4 countries alongside Egypt, South Africa, and Kenya, and they account for 60% of digital entrepreneurial activities in Africa. How has the growth of technology-driven or technology-enabled companies, whose needs are very different from the average user, shifted the investment landscape for digital infrastructure?
Okay, the investment landscape for digital infrastructure, there's a lot of opportunity that we see. I talked about some of the growth drivers, and I also mentioned some of these growth areas that you talked about around Africa. You know, Africa has about, I think, about 16, 17% of world population and about 4% of global GDP. So it's what I call the prosperity gap, okay? There's something that will need to close that prosperity gap. If you look at data center infrastructure, Africa has just 1% of data center infrastructure globally. Now that's even broader than that prosperity gap. And we make the assertion that that prosperity gap is going to be closed through digital infrastructure, right? And that's how we unleash a lot of the inherent potential of the different economies, okay? So we say, well, why don't we just have these data centers growing all over the place? And there are a variety of things that have to come together with respect to the growth that we see, the addressable market growth. South Africa has around about 55% of invested data center technology of the whole of the continent, right? Of this 1% that we have. Therefore, if we invest in the infrastructure that delivers data center capability, this attracts not only growth of local digital hosting and capability, it attracts global investment of bringing cloud services, of bringing content distribution networks into play. So, we say with Rack Center being carrier neutral, that means you have this ecosystem that interconnect, and that speaks to some of the stuff that Mariam talks about, where you have, a capability that enables you to have mass interconnection between different network product providers, in addition to the hosting you have. That enables the cloud infrastructure, and you're having some of these carrier neutral data centers now being growing across Africa, okay? So it's that interplay between, one, reputation for quality. We have that bar indisputably set now with respect to the quality infrastructure available. Two, with that, it creates a reputation that creates the confidence for the investments to come in, and so a lot of the global players to come in and complement the local players, apart from what we call enterprise hosting. Right, I've mentioned before that the way to tap into this sachet economy is to deliver technology at an affordable level. You pay as you go, you pay as you consume, right? So you have the interplay of these two that will drive the investment in this data center growth. It's bound to happen, and we put the fundamentals in place. Okay, the track record, the reputation for quality, the ecosystem that allows this interconnectivity that will drive and bring in the global investments that will bring cloud services. And then you'll see this virtual circle that will drive up growth in infrastructure and infrastructure investments.
Thank you, Tunde. Thank you so much for that response. Back to you, Kabir. If you look at it, we're still in the pandemic, and when people say the pandemic is over, it's not over. So we've got to be very careful. But that has actually highlighted the necessity of digital infrastructure, and in many markets, accelerated investment in that area. But looking at the real estate sector, which would have been heavily impacted globally. Has the pandemic made investment into digital infrastructure more attractive, or has it just highlighted the gap that needs to be closed in Africa?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's necessarily made it more attractive. I think that was always the case, but what it has done is accelerated data consumption and therefore demand. That in turn highlights the supply gap, but equally spotlights the opportunity. Like every other region in the world, the pandemic, as Mariam had mentioned, has permanently changed our relationship with the internet. Far more integrated into our lives. We use it for work, education, entertainment, communication, even healthcare. And that's not a trend we expect to see sort of reverting, abating, or changing. Once people are on data and they're integrated into data use, that'll continue to grow. Interesting statistics, MTN Nigeria, Safaricom in Kenya reported huge spikes, not just in data revenues, but the number of genuine data users on their network through the pandemic. And that's just now, that's just today. That is an increased growth, an increased use that needs to be addressed immediately, because we don't have the infrastructure that is ideal, the networks that is ideal to cope with that. Andrew talked about demographics and how the demographic story for Africa is going to play out. So if you couple that with inadequate supply and a growing demand and growing data usage, Africa, we're the fastest growing region in terms of data consumption. I think Ericsson put out a stat that over the next 5 years, mobile data will grow 12 times. It's staggering. And that will that'll need infrastructure to support the use of it. Tunde's made the point that relative to other parts of the world, on a per capita basis, or whichever way you want to measure it, Africa in terms of towers, data centers, fiber is far, far lower. But all that said and done, I think the point made by other panelists, which is critical, is it's got to be affordable. And affordability is the key thing to the end user. And I think initiatives like the cables you were talking about in your presentation will bring in more capacity, which in turn should hopefully decrease the cost, which in turn should hopefully mean more people get into the data economy and data usage. So yeah, I don't think it's made it more attractive, but it's certainly accelerated the need and put a big spotlight on it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Kabe. Back to you, Mariam. Yeah, and I've been itching to ask you this. It's around when you think about the next generation of Africa tech startups, and from fintech to edtech to healthcare tech startups, we've got a lot of tech startups now. What areas of digital infrastructure do you think need the most investment to support these businesses? Because these are really new and thriving businesses, but what areas of infrastructure do you think need the most investment to support all these new startups?
I think we all know that Nigeria is now home to around 200 standalone fintech companies, and also a number of fintech solutions that are being offered by banks and mobile network operators as part of the product portfolio. So, the fintech ecosystem is rising, and we have seen it its value increase into around $600 million in funding. And that has attracted 25% of the African startup market to be in Nigeria as of 2019 alone. This is second to Kenya, which attracted around 149 million. So for fintechs to create the impact that we want them to in terms of digital economic transformation, I think there are three broad dimensions that we need to think about. So through the stimulation of economic activities, we need to create a multiplier effect and also driving progress towards some of the developmental goals that we have identified through the SDGs. So the economic impact of making sure that the fintech industry, for example, or if we're thinking about it more holistically and from a very broad sense, the entrepreneurship ecosystem and innovation, the sector can unlock economic benefits by driving increased productivity, capital, and labor through the digitalization of some of these services. So in the long term, unlocking the next wave of the innovation ecosystem across Africa may require collaborative efforts between multiple regulators. So we're thinking about people like CBN, we're thinking about NCC, as well as the Security and Exchange Commission and insurance regulators. is that we need to answer questions around whether this is currently happening at the moment or whether it's a simple no. And if so, how do we bring these kinds of players to the table to say, all right, this is what we need to do around the infrastructure challenge to be able to open our market for the tech ecosystem to really place Nigeria as one of the key players. For example, I know that our DE4A report placed Lagos as one of the upcoming Silicon Valleys of Africa, particularly within the software development area. And also we need to think about the regional financing institutions that we can consider. In this sense, we can encourage them to set up robust structures that can support tech startups within the regulatory frameworks that would encourage innovation and experimentation, while also managing some of the existing risks that are prevalent in Nigeria already. We also have regional bodies that we can bring to the table. They also need to improve and support the digital infrastructure to enable startup growth. So this could include things around addressing the cost and quality of data and accessing data. Because I know that data, it's a big thing now. There's so many initiatives around, data for social good. If we have access to data, which can be facilitated via the infrastructure available in Nigeria, a lot of tech startups can use some of these data to be able to put together compelling ideas that would create economic activities in no time and also reap the demographic dividends that we have. A lot of young startups are owned by young people in Nigeria. That is the trend. So if we have access to data, there's a lot more that can happen in that area. So those are, I think, the three key things that I would summarize.
Okay, just a quick one, just to follow up on that. This question is actually for yourself and Dr. Nari, because I know you guys, when it comes to regional financial institutions like Afrexim, AFDB, World Bank, you know a lot about. How are the regional financial institutions currently doing? Are they currently doing enough to invest in infrastructure and that will enable this next generation of tech startups? You guys have, you've got access to most of these financial institutions in Africa. So do you think they are doing enough?
I would say yes and no. It's a very tricky one to slice and either pick a yes or a no. I would say yes, because a lot of the financing opportunities are there. If you make a case for an opportunity that needs to be financed for infrastructure, then yes, that is something that I know that, things like the organizations like the World Bank and IFC we're pushing for. However, there's also the issue of the lack of awareness. So for example, in Nigeria, we have the Universal Service Provision Fund. That is something that is, in my opinion, significantly underutilized and underexploited by the Nigerian government. So if we can tap to some of these available funding sources, that I think that would play a key role into radically shifting the opportunities for digital economy in Nigeria. So the opportunities are there, but it comes down to also being able to leverage what is out there, what is available. But even if the opportunities for funding aren't available, for us, we offer technical assistance, we offer funding for operational projects as well as financing and loans for these kinds of projects. So how it works is that if Nigeria has a problem with infrastructure, they approach organizations like the World Bank. Okay, we need X amount of money, either as a loan or as a grant to finance our digital ID initiative. And if there's a case for it, you then get the funding, but also the issue then is not around whether or not the funding is available. It could be available, but it also then comes down to how it is used. And that brings up a whole other conversation that might take us another hour to discuss. So I'll stop for now.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our position over the years has been clear. I mean, in the Nigerian context, Nigeria is, in fact, I didn't say that there are some now projections that Nigeria will be the second most populous country in the world this century, which is extraordinary. So it's effectively the biggest economic opportunity on the planet, and it's not getting enough investment, not just in the digital sector, but across the board. I don't think that's the fault of AFDB or AfraXim or IFC. I mean, I think they've made, really amazing efforts there. AfraXim's put started a PE fund, started a venture capital fund. I think one part of it is that you need, there isn't enough resources in Africa. You need to crowd in, catalyze other resources to come in, particularly from the deep pockets of foundations and investors from the United States in particular. But the basic issue in Nigeria is, despite being the largest economic opportunity on the planet, we're not getting sufficient investment. So I didn't talk through the numbers, but one of the charts I showed that we only have, in economist terms, gross capital formation of about 17–18%. To hit 6 to 8% like growth, GDP growth like India, we need investment in the range of 26 to 29%. So it's a fair question to ask. The question I ask the federal government of Nigeria is, why do people not want to come to the biggest party on the planet? So it still goes back to, we need an easier investing environment. I know myself, having done several startups in Nigeria, it is just very tough. And of course, the investors know how tough it is to start. So it's a little bit circular. We just need overall a better investment environment, not just for digital, but also for housing, for basic physical infrastructure, for power, et cetera, on that. And until we solve that, certainly in Nigeria, we're going to struggle. On the other hand, around Africa, I mean, you can see, if you look at Ghana, you can see if you look at Cote d'Ivoire, obviously Rwanda. I mean, there are lots of bright spots where people want to invest in Africa. So I think we have something to learn in Nigeria from other countries around the continent.
Thanks, Dr. Navin. We're running out of time. I'm going to manage to still be able to push one or two questions. Dr. Popa, this is for you. There are two areas where we've seen a lot of international interest on the continent, and they've been in, when it comes to internet access, whether through fiber optic networks, undersea cable infrastructure, and capacity building, with major players like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, all launching initiatives in this area. From an investment standpoint, and you are more of a technical person. So, are these guys, are there other areas that are relevant to the growth of West African digital economies that you feel that these investors are overlooking at the moment?
It's sort of like there are two sides to the coin, the opportunity, and then the other comes in, so the investment and the platform that will therefore attract the investment from these key players. There's some very, very practical things in that. Once we have an environment that is, ripe for consumption, and you've got the infrastructure that's proven that can deliver to it, and I mentioned some of that before, then issues around customer experience in a whole range of areas come to play. And that therefore means that you can't go hosting technology or digital services that will be consumed locally elsewhere. This thing called latency comes into play, and which means, the lag between because of the distance from which it's been hosted. So once that demand starts to happen, the practical thing is really, you've got to host closer to the user. There's this technical term called edge, it's the edge data center. So in the consumptive areas on the continent, having edge data centers that are neutral with, this kind of ecosystem I talk about, become very, very important. Now, where you have players who understand Africa, who drive and implement digital infrastructure in Africa, why come in and start building yours, so on? You start to find that what you need to do is get closer to the point of consumption and delivering services like cloud, like gaming, like betting, streaming content, so on, at the point closer to the point of use becomes essential. It's just a very, very practical constraint. So these players are therefore looking at Africa and looking at how they can deliver their services closer to the point of use. And this will build, and is building, a lot of momentum. Much has been said about what Google is doing with the Aquino cable. Much has been said about what Facebook is doing with the To Africa in the consortium. You mentioned in your slides the amount of connectivity that we have feeding Africa. And we have infrastructure that enables these undersea cables to come together in one place. Means that you can connect every single country on the Atlantic coast of Africa seamlessly at high quality. Therefore, it's bound to drive and attract these players. And once you've got the infrastructure and the proven capacity and ability to do that, and to kind of deal with some of these idiosyncrasies of doing business, which has to improve, but nevertheless, we have a starting point that Andrew mentioned. Then it brings these players together with infrastructure providers like ourselves and other data center companies in Africa. You're finding some of that happening in East Africa, and significantly more in South Africa, to deliver the infrastructure for these companies to come in, and they will come. The dynamics and the realities is that they will come, but not at the expense also of local capacity and capability. One of the things we also do is nurture local players to grow competency and deliver high quality services locally as well. So there'll be a good balance between key players coming in and building local capability.
Thank you, Dr. Coker. Because of time, I only have one question, and it's actually for all the panelists. If you can just respond in 10 seconds. I do not like to close any discussion on digital, whether it's infrastructure, anything digital, without us talking about this. And when we talk about digital infrastructure, we think about the cables that make up the networks. We talk about the servers that make up the cloud. But what often gets neglected are the people and their skills, both of which are very essential to shaping future digital economics. And we've been here for 1 hour. We haven't talked about ourselves as people. We've not talked about the skills. And that's why I can't close the session without talking about people and skills. Looking particularly at skills, are there areas you can point to where we have made strides? Where do you think we need to invest to tap into our human resource potential? So we really need the skills to be invested in Africa. So back to you, Dr. Coker, in 10 seconds, then followed by Mariam, Kabir, and Andrew.
Most of our staff in RAC Center are Nigerian, and we've demonstrated that we can actually build world-class capability by investing in people. The capacity that we have to step up it's excellent.
Thank you. Mariam?
Yes, so I will respond by saying that we need to invest more in young people and women and ensuring that they are able to acquire the relevant skills that they need via, could be through education programs, it could be through TVET, it could be through dedicated programs. So for example, we've run a digital skills training program in Kaduna State via the World Bank in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation.
Thank you. Fabio?
Yeah, look, clearly digital skills are critical to the future, to economies, and a huge opportunity for job creation. So, I'd agree with the rest of my panelists. I think, we need to be focused on upskilling vocational training. It's an area we focused on in traditional real estate. We've set up programs to hire unemployed youth from the environs of our sites and training them, accredit them in certain trades, allowing them to get jobs on our sites and on other building sites. So, there is an opportunity to connect investments with training and education initiatives, something we've done in our data center platform in China, for example. And I think, it goes all the way from basic upskilling, digital literacy, all the way up to sort of higher education, for example, the academy that I just referred to.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabio. Dr. Naibu?
Yes, I mentioned I was with this wonderful event with His Excellency the President of Ghana on Saturday, and he made a very good point, which I think is exactly relevant here. He said, look, education is obviously the foundation of everything, but the education has to be relevant and meaningful. And I think Kabir has hit it on the head. We need to shorten up the period from education to earnings in a way, and people can kind of see the path. So if you think about kind of employment for coding, coding for employment, C4E, I mean, we need to have programs that is very visible to the participant that they're going to get an outcome here. There's no point in just giving an education that doesn't lead to a job or doesn't lead to someone's life being better. So I think we have much more practical education, as Dr. Lawal said, or at TVET, for example, and what Kabir is doing in the real estate industry. That's what we also need to be doing in the IT industry, to be digital industry.
Thank you, Dr. Nevin. I've got about 8 minutes to pick some questions. I think we've got a few questions from the attendees, from the participants. And the first one will go to, and I will stop at the end of 8 minutes. The first one goes to Dr. Andrew, which is around, okay, hold on, it's moved a bit. Digitization is good with its benefits. No, that is not the question. Sorry, it's moved. Okay, digitization is good with its benefits, but Africa's low development with its high poverty, how can the cost be absorbed to allow for accessibility? I'm not sure that's really the question that I had for, but if someone can take that, please.
Let me just take this quickly because it relates to what I was talking about a little earlier. I mean, the reason that we need to be focusing on exporting brains and tying that to this digital agenda and digital innovation is obviously, there's a world price for the hardware and the digital infrastructure, and Africa needs to pay the world price, the same way it needs to pay the world price for hydroturbines, for example. The only way it's going to be able to afford it is if it has high productivity. And the best way to do that is to insert African brains into global value chains that have high productivity. So if you just, a simple example, if you were going to start a factory to produce low-end fans in Nigeria that employed 100 people, that would be an absolute misery. If you were going to train 100 brilliant young Nigerians or brilliant Africans to be inserted into Google's global value chain, into Facebook's global value chain, into outsourcing, that is eminently doable, and they're going to earn, 10 times as much. So we need to have as many Africans as possible inserted into the global value chains to have incomes go up fast enough that we can afford the hardware it's only got a world price. It doesn't have an African price.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Neville. This is for Dr. Oka, I think. It's obvious that we currently still have a gap with technology infrastructure, e.g. metro fiber, availability of enough IP exchanges, and now edge computing is recently pulling itself to the forefront. What are the key collaboration points that are critical in order for Nigeria, West Africa, Africa as a whole to succeed in gaining reasonable grounds using technology?
Thanks. Yeah, I think I spoke to some of this before in having, the baseline for some new infrastructure. We talked about broadband penetration that continues to improve. And also, if you have a digital anchor point, say in a location in a region like Lagos, the benefits go across the region. It's not just about where you are, because that capacity and capability can be consumed elsewhere. And we'll see complementary sort of infrastructure development coming across a region like West Africa, for instance. They're having some growth in digital infrastructure also happening in Ghana. And you'll see that extending to some of the Francophone countries like Cote d'Ivoire, for instance. So it's a step-by-step process. Proven infrastructure attracts investment, attracted investment grows it. It's a virtuous cycle that I actually see continuing to develop over time. Are we at the tipping point? I think anecdotal evidence, anyway, is showing that tipping inflection point of growth we're at it, or very close, where you then get this significant growth in data center growth. I mean, we've announced 13 megawatts of increased data center growth at our current location in Lagos, for instance, an indication of the fact that we're seeing that inflection point and density of ecosystem to enable interconnections, and also internet exchange. The volume of data through the internet exchange point of Nigeria, which we host, is increasing significantly, exponentially over the last couple of years. And 80% of internet traffic is being localized, and that continues to increase as well. So all these real sort of data points that I've talked about are showing the growth and us being in that inflection point of growth.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. And another question for you, because this is specific to RAC Center. As part of mid-term or long-term, will RAC Center be considering infrastructure as a service or platform as a service to help cater for SME startups of the stature economy and that you referred to?
Yeah, good question. One of the things we say, we're carrier neutral, so we provide the capability for all carriers to coexist. We're also cloud neutral, which is very important because we don't compete with services of our cloud providers. However, what it means is that we now have what we cloud marketplace, right? Where you have a whole range of cloud providers for either infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, hosted locally, so you can host your data locally. The underpinning thing that we do is we gave them this 100% track record of 100% available infrastructure. Since we went live, we had 100% uptime. They know that that's dealt with. The cloud providers then provide their services to small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises. So you're now finding that the enterprises are not just hosting, they also continue consuming cloud services locally and some internationally. And you find some of those international players coming in locally as well to provide this range of cloud services. Much more confidently because they know the environment they're in is not competing with them. It's the same thing of managed service providers. They can actually provide package services with co-location as part of that package. So increasingly you'll see outsourced entire IT services, which is, where an area PwC would play in as well, in the advisory of how do you now package these services to drive business change and growth, right? You see this virtuous cycle of growth starting to happen because we've put the fundamentals in place.
Thank you so much. I think my time is up exactly on time. Thank you, Dr. Coker. Thank you, Dr. Mariam Lawal. Thank you, Pavel. And thank you, Dr. Nevin. I am just going to hand over back to the host. I think our time is up. Thank you so much, and thanks the participants. And hopefully next quarter when we have the next series, you will obliged to join us again. But we're going to, this is just the start of the series here. Thanks so much, and Ada, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Femi. Thank you. Job well done. Thank you. So thank you to everyone. Just before we hand over, I would like to announce the poll results. Great. So to our question, in your view, which of these things will have the most impact on the African economy within the next 5 years? 50% of us mentioned export growth through services. I actually concur on that. And the rest, climate change, 19%. It's nice that we're becoming aware of climate change. And then shift from GDP lens to SDG, very important, 18%. We'll get there. With the second question, in your opinion, what will be the leading enabler for the 5th industrial revolution? 33% said 5G, artificial intelligence, 30%, blockchain, 12%, and big data, 24%. So great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your input. I would like at this point to thank our esteemed guests, to everyone who contributed to the content, and the panelists, Dr. Nevin, Dr. Coker, Dr. Lawal. Should I institute Dr. Chow and Dr. Oshinibi to call?
You could say Dr. Chow, but my mother, who is the only doctor in the family, would not be very pleased.
She will be pleased, right? Nice one.
I'm yet to have one in my family, so I'll push my children to have a PhD.
Right. And thank you to everyone who has attended. We hope that this event has been informative and insightful. This is one of many series, like Femi's mentioned. We'll be hosting another 2 or 3 in the next couple of months. So please look out for upcoming news. But just before I hand over to Dr. Coker, CEO, RAC Center, he's mentioned, I need to plug here, Africa's leading carrier neutral tier 3 data center. You give me brownie points after this. To give the closing remarks, may I please ask everyone to please leave feedback. We do need your feedback. We need your comments. Please use the Q&A feature. We do need to your comments to improve on the next session that we have. So from me, it's thank you, and over to you, Dr.
Yes.
Coker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ada, for fantastic hosting and anchoring the session. I would also like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank PwC for the great partnership we have here. It's a great interplay. Mariam, Dr. Mariam Kabir Chal, Dr. Andrew Nevin. And in closing out, please look out for the series. It's a broad issue around digitization of Africa. It is the next digital frontier. There's the infrastructure aspect to be looking at further down the line. There's the content aspect, the content opportunity that we spotlight to the world on what this is. And just to very, very quickly, some key points that brought about in digital, inclusion and diversity and inclusion. We have to do this with sustainability in mind. The right kind of investments to grow digital infrastructure. And also we talked about affirmative action in different ways to make sure we anchor the growth potential that we have on the continent. But then at the end of the day, the thing that joins all of this up, as we've talked about, is people. And we will be talking about some of these things in the future sessions that we have. Thank you very much. Look forward to having you back on board, everybody. In the future sessions, look out for it, and have a good day. We appreciate your presence. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
All right, thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.